But let's get started, because I've been really, really looking forward to this conversation, and it's so many facets of it. And just the first, on a personal note, it's kind of funny to speak to somebody who's also an identical twin, and also a younger identical twin, because I'm 6 minutes younger than my brother, and I think you are 7 minutes younger.
I'm 7 minutes.
Yeah. And
I have so many twin questions for you. Yes, I just have finished sending a message to my twin about my trip here.
cool.
Yeah, it's a very particular community of people, and it's a very wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And in my life, a very difficult thing, but also it's the best thing in my life. And at moments, the thing that makes me most angry and frustrated. But no, I wouldn't change it.
No, I know what you mean. And I think the reason I bring it up, of course, is Zand in your book has a very, or in your work and how you got started with ultra-processed food, I think has a special place. Could you tell me a bit about it?
Almost the most important message in the book is, it's kind of buried a little bit in the middle for lots of reasons. But for many years, I nagged my brother. So he moved to the US. So let me rewind. We're genetically identical. I have many friends who study the genetics of weight gain and obesity, and so they have done testing on me. Zand and I both have all the genetic risk factors for weight gain. And
Yeah.
we know, if listeners are wondering if they have these genetic risk factors, it's really easy to tell. If you're someone who loves food, if your holiday itineraries are lists of restaurants, and you think about dinner when you're preparing breakfast, then you have risk factors for obesity. Now, normally people like me, I'm protected by income and by education, and being surrounded by good food. My brother moved to America to a very stressful food environment in a stressful situation. He was a student, and so he gained more than 20 kilos in a year. And so for a decade, I was very ashamed of him, and I am ashamed now to say this, but your twin brother is an ambassador for you in the world.
Yeah.
People think you're the same person. And the crucial moment, that the thing that allowed him to get control of his health, he did lose weight. I don't feel we should celebrate weight loss. It is so hard to do for so many people, but he got control of his health. He did lose weight. The moment I stopped nagging him was when he could do it. So almost, if people read this book, the most important thing is to stop shaming and nagging people, whether they are your friends, whether they're your voters, your patients. Don't shame people about diet-related disease. It is, as you well know, it is the food, not the individual. So if people listening are struggling, it is not their fault. So.
And yeah. I brought that up because I think that's one of really the key message, because there is so much shame and self-doubt, and most people put the blame on themselves, and they don't understand the powers they're up against and how extremely well thought out every product, every facet of a product is to get you hooked, get you addicted.
That is the best synopsis maybe of the way of thinking about it that I've heard. So the way I describe it is, every ultra processed food, all the foods that we buy that are in our supermarkets, each one of them has thousands of different properties, or facets, as you say. It has a texture, it has a packaging, it has fonts, it has an advertising jingle, it has saltiness and sweetness and a pH level and acid ratios. It will have bitterness and sourness, and thousands and thousands of different properties all blended. Every single one of those properties has been dialed up to 11 in order to make you eat more of it more often. This food is incredibly sophisticated, and it is marketed using the most sophisticated technologies as well. So the marketing budget of any one of the food companies that feed us is, runs into many billions of pounds or dollars. So if people struggle, you are up against enormous companies and thousands of scientists with PhDs creating substances that are very, very irresistible. So yeah, it is not your fault. It is the food.
Yeah. No, and I think that's so important. And but it's so interesting to me, because you're a medical doctor and you have a PhD in molecular virology. So from my take, it wouldn't be natural to go into the food, the nutrition area. But was it the thing with your brother that got it started, or what was the sort of?
There were there were two things. So I'm an infectious diseases specialist. I treat patients with complex infections and particularly tropical diseases. And that might seem a weird fit, but as maybe 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time working as a doctor in very, very poor countries in Central African Republic, Myanmar, northern Pakistan in the hills. And the kids that I saw die of infections all died because of the marketing of baby food to their parents. And people in these settings couldn't clean bottles, couldn't read the instructions on the boxes, but most of all, they did not have access to clean water to make up the baby food. And so it didn't matter how many antibiotics we used, the kids always died because they were drinking sewage mixed with baby food. And so my research focus switched from studying bacteria and viruses to studying how corporations affect our health. And the leading cause of health problems on planet Earth right now, the leading cause of early death for human beings is poor diet because of food companies. The second leading cause is tobacco products because of tobacco companies. And remember, the tobacco companies and the food companies were the same companies. In the mid-1980s, Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds bought Nabisco, General Foods, Kraft. They created the biggest food companies in the world, and they made cigarettes and food. And all the flavor molecules that they were using in the cigarettes to separate all the different flavors and create, and the marketing technologies separating camels from cowboys, from women smoking minty cigarettes, all of that was transferred to the food. So from the mid-80s to the early 2000s, food was made by tobacco scientists. And that's the ancestry of ultra-processed food. And that is why we have to think of the companies as tobacco companies, and we need to use that regulatory playbook. Unless you understand how companies affect health, you will not improve human health. These are the major things that affect our lives in Sweden, in the UK, and around the world.
And I totally agree. But it must be frustrating being a doctor, because there are still some pretty prestigious people around who claim that it's not ultra-processed food. It's not the processing. It's the high fat, the high salt, or whatever. And what do you tell these people when you meet them? Because then, in my view, having worked with a lot of doctors, they are pretty stubborn and stick to what they've learned.
So doctors are a terrible problem. Doctors are arrogant, often misinformed. We abuse our patients in the sense of we stigmatize them. I would suggest that people who live with excess weight, most of the harm is not from being physically big. That there are health harms with that, but they're not that significant compared to other things. Most of the harm comes from the fact that doctors treat larger patients extremely badly. We give you less appointment time. We prescribe fewer drugs. We don't like seeing you, and we blame you for your illness. So doctors are a big problem. In terms of the public debate, there are some very high-profile doctors who oppose me. The discussion, the idea that there is a debate, though, is synthetic. Yeah. Every single one of those doctors has a relationship with the major food companies. All the scientists who oppose me do. So this is like climate change. For a long time, there was like a climate debate when you would, I'm sure this happened on STV, it happened on the BBC. You'd have a scientist going, well, man-made climate change is a big problem. And then you'd have another scientist going, well, volcanoes are a bigger issue. Yeah. We now know that those other scientists were funded by industry. So on my side, I have some quite powerful allies, right? Who does believe the evidence around ultra-processing? I'll come to the common sense bit in a second, but we have the government of France warning its population about ultra-processed food. Same in Belgium, Mexico, Argentina, Canada, Brazil, Israel. There's a long list of countries that do believe this evidence. We have UNICEF, who have the best nutrition team in the entire world. We have the United Nations Food and Agriculture Program. We have the World Food Program, sorry, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program. And we have research groups at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the Karolinska Institute, McGill, Oxford, Cambridge. So there are some good scientists who believe all this. It is becoming, there is, I would say, no controversy that a diet high in industrially processed or ultra-processed foods drives human health harms, that those foods cause health harms. There is some discussion around some of the mechanics, around the mechanisms, but not really. We understand quite a lot about that. So the idea that food is just fat, salt, sugar, and fiber, and that those are the only things that determine health is also just obvious nonsense. So here is why processing matters. If I get a bowl of fat, we'll just get some pig fat, some lard, or some olive oil, and I get a bowl of sugar, and I get some salt. If we mix them together and create high fat, salt, sugar paste, it will be disgusting. No one will want to eat it. And you will not want to eat the fat, the salt, or the sugar on their own. They're all disgusting. However, if you then take that paste of fat, salt, and sugar, and we add some emulsifiers, we smooth it out, we color it, we put in some flavoring molecules, we add some different acids to create some sourness, some bitter tastes. We texture it, we fry it, extrude it, cover it in a coating of maltodextrin and starches, put an animal on the pack and wrap it up in colorful, and then do an ad about it and make a health claim and put in some vitamins. Now we have a product that is addictive. All of the stuff that makes you eat it is the ultra processing. So it is very obvious to anyone who's ever cooked food or eaten food that processing affects appetite, the quantity you eat. And this is the crucial thing, I think, that people need to understand. Processing is fine. Humans have been processing food for well over 1 million years. Cooking is processing. Chopping is processing. Pickling, fermenting, it's all processing. Ultra processing is when you process food with the intention of selling as much of it as possible. It's about making money. And so this is the optimization of all those different facets of the food.
But
and
also,
sorry.
Well, maybe add that it's something that you couldn't do at home because you need really advanced chemicals and machinery to be able to do it, basically.
And even if you were to go and buy phosphoric acid, xanthan gum, emulsifiers, you can buy them all on Amazon. You can get a food processing unit. You could get an industrial deep fryer. You still can't do it because your intention is different. And the purpose of the food is very important. When you cook at home, and people do cook at home with xanthan gum, for example, for patients with celiac disease, they are not ultra processing, because when you make bread at home with xanthan gum, your intention is to nourish the people around you. And so you are not designing your bread to make them eat a loaf every 5 hours. You're designing it to make them satisfied. So ultra processing is as much about the financial incentives as it is about the mechanics of what you actually do to the food.
I like that. Yeah, it's a good addition to the NOVA classification, for example, because
that is in the full 9-paragraph definition. Profit and purpose are built into that definition. And so my research now, most of it is done with economists. And our last paper, we used financial data from within the food system to demonstrate that all of the incentives that the companies operate with are financial. That is from the person selling the chew bar into the shop all the way up to the chief executive and the scientists in the middle. Every single person is incentivized by delivering a financial outcome. Health has nothing to do with it.
No, I totally agree. And having worked with this now for quite some time, you've done podcasts, written books, and so on. And now your latest book, The Ultra Processed People, vad vi äter in Swedish, is being released. And what would be your hope? Because this is a tough area. It's a super complex situation with so many sort of layers intertwined, and change is difficult. But what would your hope be?
The book has 2 aims. So there is a selfish aim for the selfish reader. If someone listening is wondering whether they should buy the book, I've written it using this very well-evidenced psychological technique. So there's a very famous book called The Easy Way to Quit Smoking. And at the beginning of the book, you are advised to continue smoking while you read. The book explains why cigarettes are bad for you. It doesn't tell you ever to stop smoking. And by the end of the book, you stop smoking. This book on smoking is recommended by the World Health Organization. It's been used in clinical trials. It's more effective than nicotine gum. It's a really great book. My invitation to the reader at the beginning of my book is just to keep eating the food. The food will be the best way of eating the food, is the best way of understanding it. And my proposal is that we are all part of an experiment that we did not volunteer for. New molecules, new combinations of molecules, these are tested on us the entire time. We didn't consent to this. We take all the risk. The companies take all the benefit. So now just do the experiment for yourself. By the end of the book, anecdotally, many readers go, yeah, no, I stopped wanting the food because I realized this wasn't real food. And this is what happened to me, is I was quite addicted to this food. In writing the book and speaking to all my colleagues and learning about the food, I now, not only do I not eat it, I don't want to eat it, and I find it disgusting. But the other project of the book is I want the reader to become an activist, because people who can buy books are quite a small group of people. They have money, they are literate, they're educated. They need to be voters, really, because it is people who can't buy books that are the most affected by this crisis. And so really what we need is structural change to the food system. We need those regulatory approaches that we brought to big tobacco. So it's about taking these lessons of tobacco control and going, how do we control this food? And we've got, there's a very, very good starting, well, there are two starting points, really. If you need to do two things in Sweden, I would suggest the first thing is you have to regard industry money as dirty money. In the UK, all of the doctors, all of the influencers, the scientists, the big charities that influence food, and the government committee who advise on nutrition, it is all funded by the food industry. That money has to, that's what tobacco did. Of course, they funded all the research in the 60s and the 70s. The money has to become dirty. The second thing is warning labels. Now, that sounds like kind of finicky little technical thing. In Chile, Mexico, Argentina, South America, they've started to put on these black octagons, these stop signs. And they use sugar, salt, fat, caffeine, coloring, and non-nutritive sweeteners to do it. So they're not actually too focused on the processing. If you use good definitions for levels of sugar, salt, calories, in fact, you can label all the ultra-processed food. So that's what they were trying to do. And we know it shifts purchasing. Once you've got a black octagon on a product, that all your other policies follow from that. Obviously, you can't sell food with black octagons in school. You can't advertise it to children. You can't put cartoon characters on it. You can't make health claims on it. So it's a very, very powerful tool. And in Chile, we have early data that when you put black octagons on breakfast cereal and you take the tiger off the breakfast cereal, or the monkey, children ask their parents to stop buying the breakfast cereal. Because kids are quite, I mean, I do a lot of work with kids in the UK. Kids are really smart. Kids want to be tall, strong, well, and smart. Yeah. And if they know a food will, if it's on the box going, yeah, no, this is a warning, kids actually don't want to eat food with warnings.
And especially true when you see you can have 2, 3 of these black octagons on some products. And I think I read in the Lancet that especially for sweetened drinks or any beverage that's been the most dramatic decrease, which is fantastic, because it's much
really good
from there from.
And I think the Lancet paper you read was written by a friend called Fabio da Silva Gomez, who has really kind of led this work in Brazil and Mexico and Argentina. I mean, soft drinks at the moment in Sweden or the UK, my 6-year-old can walk into any shop and buy a can of cola that will contain high levels of sugar, an addictive drug, caffeine, and lots of phosphoric acid. You do not have to believe the evidence on ultra processing to believe me that we know sugar is harmful. Caffeine should not be given in large quantities to children, and phosphoric acid will dissolve teeth and may dissolve your bones as well. Why is there not a warning label on cans of cola? I mean, there is no nutritional scientist in the world that believes that is a healthy product. And yet in the UK, we have a traffic light system so that the cans of Diet Coke have 4 green lights because there's no sugar, no fat, no saturated fat, and no salt. So a Diet Cola is the healthiest thing you can buy, and a can of sugary cola has only one red light and 3 green lights. So the reason for that is the food industry designed the warning, our traffic light warning system, which allows Coke to put an officially sanctioned ad on their can. So it's very obvious to me that you need to start with a warning label on sugary drinks. There is no controversy there. So what gives the lie to these I mean, you talk about the high-profile people who oppose me, and some of them are quite credible sounding. If they are not asking for black warning signs on cans of cola, that's how you know they're not credible. And they may well be a professor of nutrition at a big university, but if they are not saying we should put a warning sign on a Coca-Cola, then you can disregard every single other thing they say, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And I've been fighting against ultra-processed food for like 10 years now. And if you look at in the Nordic countries, we have the Nordic dietary recommendations 2012, and then 2023. It's supposed to be 10 years in between. And still, I was waiting, hoping that ultra-processed food would be a part of it. Nothing. There's still not enough evidence. I mean, and these are supposed to be best people in Scandinavia.
So I believe you know Marit Kolby, who is a Norwegian, public figure and nutritionist, and she's a collaborator of mine. And I believe in Norway they are publishing the conflicts of interest now of the people on the committee. So my understanding of what happened with the guidelines is the science that was proposed to go in the guidelines was agreed on by the people who offered it up, but the guideline committee have relationships with industry, and so they did not write it in. The people who wrote the guideline did not put it in. And so no one is saying that we must ban ultra-processed food. No one is saying we need to throw out all the evidence on salt, fat, and sugar. I'm not saying that. Absolutely, we don't have to overturn nutritional dogma. What I'm saying is we should have warning labels on the worst products using levels of fat, salt, and sugar, and we should have one line in national nutrition guidance saying ultra-processed foods are associated with lots of negative health outcomes, and we recommend reducing your intake. Some people may feel addicted to them. There is no controversy in any of that statement. And the violent resistance that you meet to this, it's a very boring thing that you and I are saying. We're not saying, we're not saying anything very revolutionary. We're going, industrially processed food made by giant corporations to generate money for pension funds is engineered so you eat too much of it. That is all blindingly obvious to everyone. And saying that you should try and cut down is very well evidenced. And the evidence that eating fruit, veg, whole grains, meat, real food is also overwhelming. So none of this is controversial. And so the people who are faffing around and going, oh, well, some of this, the prospective evidence is, there are lots of confounding variables in the epidemiological data. I mean, right, this is also true of the evidence around smoking, and yet we managed to get behind that. So it's people should feel extremely angry about this and about the influence of the food industry over their lives and their health, and especially in Scandinavia, where you are healthier than us, very much more. You are much taller. Swedish children are about that much taller at the age of 5 than English children. I have a 6-year-old, and she is below average height in Sweden, but she is very tall in the UK. So, but this is going to happen here. Your diet will be destroyed. Your children are already gaining a lot of weight. They will start to shrink, and the budget that you will have to spend on healthcare will become unmanageable. So it is appalling to me that these Nordic guidelines have not put this in. And I think, I hope the book makes people angry here. That is, I guess, that I think we need well-focused rage. Yeah,
no, I think that's a good way of putting it. And I saw something. I'm currently writing my second book and targeting ultra-processed food as well. And I saw something going through the research about ILSI, which is a NGO, so-called, created by all the big food corporations. And now
it's an NGO funded by Coca-Cola.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, yeah.
It's funny. But now they are a full partner of EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority. And this blows my mind, because now they have even more official control of the European Food Safety Authority. And I mean,
I didn't know that. It makes me extremely unhappy. I mean, that is, I'm slightly reading from that. To me, it's very obvious that food can be very harmful. Big food companies affect our health in lots of ways. They affect the planet, and they need to be regulated. We regulate pharma, we regulate aviation, we regulate oil, we regulate all these industries, and the industries are fine. The pharmaceutical companies continue to make money. We still have great drugs. It doesn't need to shut anything down. What I'm proposing is also not neo-Marxist. It's not socialist. It's not anti-capitalist. the EFSA should see itself as the stringent regulator of the food companies. And that means, it doesn't mean they can never speak to the food companies, but it definitely means they can't be in partnership. I mean, if you look at the way that EFSA regulates food additives, for example, the food companies say, well, look, many of the additives we put, they've all been through a process at EFSA. If you look at the guideline on soy lecithin, say, or the dietary emulsifiers, the word obesity or metabolic health, type 2 diabetes, these words do not appear. The word microbiome does not appear. Now, there's a sort of good reason for that, and that's because that data it's incredibly hard to demonstrate if an emulsifier that you use in bread, like diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, very common datem emulsifier in almost all of the bread that you buy from the supermarket. Very hard to show if that generates obesity in human beings over 3 decades. I mean, really hard science to do. But to not even ask that question and to partner with the companies that are using it, to me, is really troubling. And my view is, if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't put it in food. If you're not sure that it won't drive obesity, then and we have lots of evidence to support that it would. We have rat data, some human data, big population data, then it shouldn't be in food. I'm really horrified by that. I mean, that is just awful.
I'll send you the link. But the crazy part, what you're talking about here is, I mean, how easy.
And ILSI, I mean, sorry, just to bang on about this, but ILSI, is it the International Life Sciences Institute? Sounds incredibly formal and official. It is a Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and it's funded by all the major food companies, but Coke was very, very instrumental in setting it up. And it is a Coca-Cola marketing device, and it has funded some terrible research around the world trying to prove that the obesity pandemic is largely caused by inactivity, which is why Coke sponsor the Olympics and they sponsor all the sports science. And, and we are, as a side note, we are sure that pandemic obesity is not caused by inactivity. It is caused by food, and particularly by soft drinks like Coca-Cola. I'm horrified.
I was as well when I saw it. And I think one of the major problems, if you look at, for example, you had titanium dioxide, E171. A couple of years ago, France decided to ban it. And then it took a couple of years before EFSA decided to act on it. But in Sweden, 3 years after, you could still get products with it in, because everything moves so slow. You get so much slack on when it has to be off the shelves of the grocery stores. And when I worked at Lidl back in the days, if we got something that was wrong with the product, it was off the shelves all over Europe within 1 day. And
really,
I mean, yeah. So it's possible, and the industry.
I mean, the titanium. So right, industry. When there is a threat to industry, when there is bacterial contamination, for example, industry can move incredibly fast. They're very skillful. Titanium dioxide. I mean, the horrible thing about that particular additive is it is a coloring. It's entirely. It's not a preservative. Create microbiological safety. It's not necessary in the human diet. We don't need titanium to build our bodies. No. It is a completely cosmetic additive, and yet still it is in our food supply. In my view, there should be no coloring added to food. Real food. Why should you be able to add color to any food? It seems extraordinary to me. Even natural coloring is added at much higher doses than it occurs in nature. So I don't know if I'd ban it, but I certainly feel that real food is not colored. You don't do it. No. And so it should be you should have a very high threshold for adding it. And people should understand that the reason the food is colored is because it looks terrible without the color, and that the colorings are probably not neutral, and they definitely drive excess consumption, or they wouldn't be in there.
But if you also talk a lot about the connection about poverty and ultra-processed food, because there's a very, very strong correlation between income and what you eat, obviously. But what I'm interested in is, like, we also have quite a large group who actually can afford real food but don't. And what would you say to those people that have the ability but still chooses ultra-processed food? Are those the ones you talk about who can afford your book and hopefully will then change their diet?
So weirdly, I think in my book there is no advice, none. I think there is none. And to a great extent, I don't care what anyone eats. There is a caveat to that, which is that what we eat affects the planet, so it does affect us all. But broadly, if people want to eat food that is labeled with big black warning octagons, and that does not have cartoon characters on it, and where there's been a public health campaign warning them about all the harms, if they decide to eat that food, go for it. If people now in Sweden decide to smoke a cigarette, there is a warning on the pack. They're paying a lot of tax. They're making a decision they've been taught about in school. To some extent, I believe people should have the freedom to do these things. So, but I suspect most of those people who are eating this food unconsciously, which will include, a massive section of the kind of Swedish middle classes who are just going, well, why would I not buy this bread? It's a bit cheaper and it seems to be healthy. It's got some seeds on it. I think a lot of them, those are the people who are going to read the book and go, oh, this is weird. Yes, of course, this isn't food. I'm going to stop. I think it's the addicts that are really, really going to struggle, because this is like trying to quit smoking in the 1960s. If I was trying to quit, I'd be on this podcast with you and you'd be smoking away. The engineer out there would be smoking. All my whole publishing team here would be smoking. It would be impossible for me to quit. And this is where we are with the food. I went on SVT last night to talk about all this. And in my dressing room, and there was a lot of Swedish traditional food around, but in my dressing room, there was an entire bowl of candy, a pack of chips and a lollipop.
Yeah.
And they were being really nice. But if I was struggling with that food, if I was still kind of addicted, it would have been very hard to have that lollipop there. It's, but this
Swedish candy is trending on TikTok now. It's the big thing, according to my oldest daughter. So yeah, but it's everywhere when you go to meetings, and blows my mind. But one thing that my youngest daughter is 7, and
so same as mine, basically.
Yeah. And she watches YouTube or whatever, TikTok. And it's incredible because sometimes I stand watching over her shoulder and I see, like, I would say 90% of what she's watching is poorly hidden commercials for Coca-Cola, Oreos. They make castles out of candy and so on. So the first thing she asks for in the morning basically is something sweet. And she is like sugar addicted. Every sort of ticks every box. And for me, I'm, as you might know, the complete other way around. So it breaks my heart, but I'm sort of trying to let go and think she will come around. So I'm not going to nag, and also learning from your book, I won't be the nagging person. So
it's so, I mean, look, I find it very comforting as a parent to know you also struggle with this. I try and my youngest, who's 3, is a fiend for sugar and junk of any kind, and so my kids are not. I don't know that. I don't have a formula for this. I don't think any parents like, here's my method, my technique, which people may find useful. I don't. My kids are still young. Who knows how this will work? They're not banned from anything. I think banning things makes it very attractive, and kids need to be normal, right? Like hanging out with their friends, they talk about food and they share this food, and they go to parties, and I want them, when they go to a party, I don't want them to be weird. So they're not banned. The foundation of their diet is pretty good. It's often quite boring. So for dinner, my kids, twice a week, they have pasta with butter and cheese on it, and they love it. And that is at least real food. When they're bored and hungry, they get in from school. Sometimes they do watch TV when they get in from school. I try and make them watch state broadcasting. I'll make them watch the BBC, and they have a bowl of raw fruit and veg. They have carrots, peppers, apples, pears, bananas, and they got to finish that stuff before they come and eat it. But most nights after dinner, they have a piece of chocolate. But the one thing I try and limit them having is the soda, the fizzy drinks. I mean, I think they are very troubling, but they are not banned. And I know there will come a moment where, how old's your oldest?
So my oldest daughter is 14. I got a son who's 11, and then my daughter youngest is 7 and a half.
And I try and do what I do for the reader, which is that while they're drinking, you know, or eating the food, I go, now look, this is what it's doing to your body. It's affecting the friendly bugs inside you.
That's
You know,
me.
I mean, they don't really listen, but you know,
The,
they will eventually. What I hope is they will find someone on social media, because social media is very poisonous, but there are also some really good sources on there. And I hope they will find a young person that you or I maybe have influenced, the sort of generation between us, who will inspire them and be like, guys, this is rubbish. And they will listen to that person.
yeah.
You know, but they won't. I don't think they're going to listen to us.
No, my son actually is sort of, he really likes that I have a lot of followers on Instagram now. So he tries.
Oh, good.
Sort of, now he goes to the gym, and he's always been eating really well. He grew up basically in the kitchen, because we had a Polish nanny when he was born, because my wife speaks Polish, and she was cooking everything from scratch. So he eats everything a grown person would eat and loves it. But yeah, even getting the influence from social media, he watches a lot of TikTok but it's mostly like fishing, nature, and stuff like that. So he's
cool.
He's safe. It's the
and
young.
I do hope the athletes, we're going to see some footballers do what, you know, I think there's only been one. There was Ronaldo, not maybe the best example to kids in a lot of ways, but he did move the Coca-Cola at the press conference, and he said agua, didn't he? And he shifted it. And that dropped 4 billion off the Coke share price instantly. But it also made no difference to Coke, because the market cap of Coke was 260 billion at the time. So, you know, it was like blip, you know, it didn't.
But still, if more people.
It was powerful.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Chris, I really want to continue this conversation later on.
I want to know more. What I'd love to do is I want to ask you, I have also thought about trying to sell food or set up a supermarket, and I've sort of failed before I even got to the stage that you got to. I realized I couldn't do it, that it would fail. But I would love to talk to you more about that, and about market forces and how to do this.
Let's
so yeah,
do
I hope
that,
we can pick this up.
I had 4 stores, and the COVID timing was literally a week off.
Nightmare.
Hadn't that happened, we would have, I don't know how many stores today, because I managed to get 2 of the stores profitable within quite a short time.
Really?
Yeah. And COVID just hit in our last funding round, because then we wouldn't need any more money, but it 2 days off, and that was the death of it. So I'm happy to talk about it, because it's my dream to, all my sort of lessons I learned, I could really, I want to start it again now, knowing exactly what to do. So
well, I will be cheering for you. I will be cheering for you, and I want to know how you do it, because I think there has to be an alternative. Someone has to come in, and you know, you can't protest without going, look, here's an alternative. Here's something that can compete in the economic system, and we'll overturn it. And so I have some colleagues trying to explore new ways of doing things. I think for me, my commitment now is also that I will never take any money from a food company. I have to see myself as a regulator. I have to be independent, and the second I kind of partner with anyone is a nightmare. So that was one of the reasons I kind of stopped. But look, I would love to pick this up.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll talk soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Johannes.
Thank you.